Rome, once the capital of a pan-European state. The Capitolini rests on what was the hilltop stronghold of the empire. It is also the birthplace of today's United Europe, where a treaty was signed 60 years ago by the leaders of 6 nations: Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. They agreed to come together peacefully after the continent's most devastating conflict. The signing of the Treaty of Rome on 25th of March 1957 took place here in the Palace of the Conservators. They signed in this room, the Hall of Orazzi and Curiazzi, named after 2 Roman families that had fought. Their battles shown here on the walls, reminding us of Europe's violent past and of the chance for this treaty to ensure a lasting peace. It was a major step towards European integration that remains a work in progress today. Said treaty architect Paul-Henri Spaak, this will be one of the greatest dates in European history. Let's go outside and talk to someone who witnessed the signing. David Willey, longtime BBC journalist, and at the time, you were a Reuters reporter, kind of a junior cub reporter at the time. What was the atmosphere like at the signing of the Treaty of Rome?
Well, if you want to know the truth, I was sent to cover the signature in this building of the Treaty of Rome.
Yes.
Because I was the office junior. Everyone was dressed for the occasion. I remember the leaders of Europe, the heads of state and the foreign ministers who actually signed the treaty were dressed in frock coats or in black.
Did you sense the weight of the moment? Did the people in the room sense the weight of the moment?
I think the Italians and the French and the Germans certainly sensed the weight of the moment. And then the presence here of Paul-Henri Spaak from Belgium. He was one of the motive forces behind the European ideal at that moment. His presence here was important. And then I think there's another interesting thing. The day after the signing, everybody trooped off to the Vatican to see the Pope. And the significance of the treaty after the war, the signing of the treaty, was not lost on him.
Did you have any inkling that what happened here would become what it is today?
Well, there was an inkling, certainly. There was a feeling that this was a momentous event.
The roots of the European Union lay in the desire of Europe's post-war leaders to ensure that never again would European nations go to war with each other. It began with the Schuman Declaration in May 1950, which led to the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. That pooling and sharing of resources paved the way for the same 6 nations to sign the Treaty of Rome 6 years later. It was the vision of founding fathers Robert Schuman, Jean Monnet, Alcide de Gasperi, and Konrad Adenauer to unite Europe on the basis of Christian democratic values, a social welfare state in a market economy. Jean-François Deniau was a leading French negotiator of the treaty.
Ça, c'est l'idée de Jean Monnet, en créant des mécanismes de coopération concrète, qu'ici même il y avait un fou qui voulait déclarer la guerre, il ne pourrait pas. Parce que chaque jour gagné est un jour gagné pour la paix. C'est quand même la plus longue période de paix qu'a connue l'Europe.
Monnet also aimed to avoid the post-World War I scenario, the humiliation of Germany under the terms of the Versailles Treaty that in part led to the rise of fascism and the Second World War. That lesson learned was clearly a motivating factor in the Rome Treaty talks, says Stephen Blockmans. He heads the EU Foreign Policy Unit at the Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels.
They had to avoid the mistakes from Versailles and therefore include Germany in any future common market agreement that would be struck with the other founding members of the European communities.
In June 1955, the concept of a pan-European entity began to take shape. The 6 countries agreed in Messina, Italy, to set up a European Economic Community and an atomic energy community. The United Kingdom, though invited, did not attend the talks, concerned about giving up sovereignty, even though it was Winston Churchill who had called a decade earlier for a United States of Europe.
This was revolutionary at the time. This was a pooling of sovereignty, or the exercise of sovereignty at the supranational level.
Here, the Via dei Fori Romani was the center of political and economic life of the Roman Empire, a Pax Romana which was forged through glaive and fire. Jean Monnet and the other EU architects engineered a Pax Europa without firing a shot, but rather through intense negotiations. It was in Brussels, in the Château de Val-Duchesse, a former convent, where delegates from the 6 founding countries of the European communities gathered. Their aim, to lay the groundwork for common market and atomic energy union proposals. David Willey was covering the conference at Val-Duchesse. Here is his account of what happened there.
It was very complicated, and it was very time-consuming. And my own feeling now is that the Brexit negotiators would do well to think of what happened then and to realize that the time scale of negotiating.
It was a complex process of compromise with some yet to be defined future steps. Instead of pure federalist goals of a supranational political union, the 6 opted for a more gradual, functionalist or economic union route.
Jean Monnet m'a toujours dit qu'il n'avait jamais employé le mot supranationalité. Jamais. Mais il faut sans arrêt faire des pas en avant. Et quand on a fait beaucoup de pas en avant, c'est plus difficile d'aller en arrière.
As a result, what has since become known as the community spirit was already at work here in the Brussels negotiations. It culminated in the agreement formerly known as the Treaty Establishing the European Community, or TEC. Since the Treaty of Rome, the European integration process has come a long way. The accomplishments are many, says EPP Group Chairman Manfred.
Well, having the time period 60 years ago in mind, after the Second World War, where we had only one emotion all over Europe, and that was hate between nations. That was the emotional atmosphere in on this continent. And having now a continent of peace, I'm 44 years old. I'm the first generation of this continent who can say that I live in peace and in freedom all over Europe. On this base, we developed a lot of very practical things for the daily life of the people. For example, the idea of free movement inside of the European Union. And another example I can share is about the economic dimension. Having, for example, the Eastern, Middle and Eastern European member states in mind, the last 20 years was a big success story. Compare today Slovakia with Ukraine, for example. Then you see how strong the economic development was. Not everything is solved till now, but we achieved a lot. We did a lot of very concrete things in regard to the interests of the people. For example, to create a competition among companies, for example, on traveling all around Europe, to have cheap flights all over Europe is an achievement of Europe. To reduce the roamings, that we are paying so much money when we are having a telephone call from another country to home.
And the European Union is like a huge magnet. Just think, it started off with 6 member states and is now 28. And while the UK is planning to leave, many other countries in the Balkans and beyond are eager to join. Today, the European Union is stronger and better prepared for the challenges in the years ahead. Thanks to that historic day 6 decades ago, when a treaty was signed here in Rome.